Truth is, I thought it mattered. I thought that
money
mattered. But does it bollocks? Not compared to how people matter.
Welcome, Mention and other fine folks, to the Someday Dispatch of the Black Letter, where we contemplate thoughts worth thinking as we try to navigate through the upside-down, topsy-turvy world we find ourselves in, seeking greener pastures on the other side, coming out hopefully healthier, wealthier, and wiser. That's the goal. In order to do that, we need to make sense of the nonsensical in many ways. Today, Sunday, we're going to take a look at the cryptocurrency market primarily. We'll also take a look at who's in there and some of the other issues that have come up with BitMEX and things of that nature. So let's get to it. From Bitcoin.com, all currencies will be pegged to Bitcoin, says Price of Tomorrow author Jeff Booth. And I've mentioned him before, read his book, The Price of Tomorrow, and it makes a compelling argument for why technology is inherently deflationary. And his argument basically is that technology is there to try and make lives easier for us, simpler, tasks faster, etc., and all of this causes a deflationary spiral. I mean, if you think about the smartphone you have right now, I mean, the capabilities of it are just astonishing. Even if you get a full-on premium flagship from Apple or Samsung or something at $1,000 or more, I mean, it has a video recorder, it's a TV screen, it's a Walkman, if you remember those, a music player. It's basically access to the internet. It's a map. There's just so many different things on it that would historically have cost you tens of thousands of dollars. So that's just a small example of how technology is deflationary. And thank God for that. I think deflation is what we need, especially to try and help society reset at some point and to create a more egalitarian and equal society. So I'm definitely on board with the deflation. And generally, just as inflation erodes your paycheck or your income that you earn more than the increases in salary that you get each year, so will deflation diminish your income, but it will be at a lower rate, usually, than what the products and services that you use your income to buy will be sort of declining in price at, if that makes sense. Entrepreneur and popular author Jeff Booth has predicted a grim future for fiat currencies, expecting them to fail as central banks keep printing money, foreseeing an unavoidable severe depression and banking failure. He believes Bitcoin will become the world's reserve currency and all national currencies will be pegged to it. One can hope and dream. I hope so. I think that's probably more of a potential outcome than going back to a gold standard, in my opinion. Highly likely Bitcoin will become the reserve currency. That would be a dream come true for me, I think. I mean, can you imagine where Bitcoin, which is a hard-capped money, becomes a global reserve currency? I mean, it will get rid of inflation, basically. All of the printing is going directly into asset prices, and it's being robbed from the greater economy he described. What's coming next is MMT, helicopter money, and everything else. And once the Fed loses its credibility, then all bets are off in inflation. So the Treasury essentially will become the Fed and print money and can distribute that money to the population. And then you're going to lose currencies all over the world. You'll also potentially lose the Federal Reserve or the central banks. I would applaud that as well. Central banks are what put us in this mess in the first place, going back to Bernanke primarily, with all that quantitative easing that he started, and then his fellow cronies continued that process, and here we are in the greatest depression in the last 100 years, or at least, I would say in the last 100 years. Certainly a bigger depression, I would imagine, that we're in than we were at the height of the Great Depression. And of course, so get rid of the Fed, that's one positive, and then I think he's saying this will happen before, of course, Bitcoin becomes a global reserve currency, and then the Treasury will essentially become the Fed and just print money and distribute that money to the population, probably under UBI, which of course I'm in support of because we've had socialism for companies for a long time, for corporations. Now let's try it for the people, at least while we try and get through this difficult period of the next several years until we get to a more perhaps hard currency or a greater reset that everyone seems to be thinking we are indicating. Now, this whole idea of the Fed being demolished or Fed losing credibility and then the Treasury just steps in to distribute money digitally, and this, of course, I think he didn't mention that, but everything will become digital at that point. They'll just deposit it straight into your bank account, bypassing the Fed and all other central banks. So that would be quite a novel thing, quite a good thing in the interim, in my opinion. Of course, it comes with its own set of problems, as he said. We're going to lose currencies all over the world because the fiat currencies will become devalued. But in the interim, hopefully that's a stopgap that will help people from dire poverty. And I've heard this from other folks as well. I think Simon Dixon is one who believes this will happen as well. Booth predicts that interest rates are going to continue to go down until currencies fail, which means that we could end up with negative interest rates. And of course, negative interest rates become a lot easier if you have a central bank digital currency, or CBDC, as you've heard it called. Booth also shared his view on the future of the stock market. The stock market is teetering. You feel like it's about to collapse, and that's all around stimulus. Without more stimulus, expect a downward spiral. If stimulus stopped, that downward spiral would take stocks down 80%, which is where I think we would get to perhaps undervaluation. I think fair valuation is stocks losing about 50% from where they are now. But usually they increase to the upside excessively, and they probably usually will decrease to the downside excessively as well. And of course, I'm not sure this is what should happen, 80% decline in value of stocks, but there's a lot of problems with that, primarily pensioners and pension funds that will be decimated, and so will folks' pensions. So I'm not sure that there's an appetite for that allowance, and so I think what will end up happening is you'll probably have the Fed Reserve stepping in and actually buying stocks, if not individual stocks, propping up the stock market through buying ETFs, S&P 500 ETFs, NASDAQ, triple Qs, something like that, to try and put a stopgap on that. So it's just dire any way you look at it, in my opinion. Anyway, there you go. One man's opinion, and something I agree with. Former Goldman institutional trader says large investors now buying Bitcoin and gold at the same pace, and here's why. Drawbridge Lending CEO Jason Urban says he's now witnessing big investors betting on gold and Bitcoin at an equal pace. Of course, when you start to get the big hedge funds and the big wealthy family funds getting in there, then I think, this is something to stick around. You can read the rest of the article, and he goes into a bit more detail as to why that's happening. Of course, he's on the inside there, and it's good to see that folks are who are going to gold, usually as a store of value in times of uncertainty, are now also buying Bitcoin in equal amounts, it seems. So that's good news as well. That can only be bullish for cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin particularly, in the long run, in my opinion. And then some negative news. Indictments issued for BitMEX senior team are a signal to all. Is BitMEX too big to fail, or are the charges a serious threat? On the morning of October 1st, the United States government authorities in New York issued indictments for 4 of the senior team of BitMEX, the famed wildcard exchange based in Hong Kong. Despite that, the crypto exchange still continues to operate its services, which is a godsend, because I think there's over $400 million worth, or maybe it's more than that now, of Bitcoin that has been taken out of that exchange and sent elsewhere, perhaps to wallets. So at least they're allowing for that. And I think this is part of the reason why Bitcoin hasn't declined more substantially on that news than it did over the last day or two. BitMEX is one of the world's largest crypto exchanges and has a reputation for being notoriously relaxed on Know Your Customer and ID procedures for its users. At least until mid-August of this year, additionally, users are allowed a high withdrawal limit with little to no KYC. So this is something I think primarily the issue here, not so much the Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies, but that they were too relaxed in the KYC. And I think this is where they're going to hammer them for, because of course, as it talks about here, what could be happening is that perhaps they're allowing countries like Iran and North Korea to move out of their crypto positions, and in which case that's a serious concern, because that's allowing folks to sort of breach international sanctions, as they said here. So interesting to see. I think what will end up happening will be substantial fines, slaps on the wrist. BitMEX will probably survive and require KYC on an ongoing basis. So I don't think this is a long-term negative impact on Bitcoin or cryptocurrency market, but still it goes to show you that government and those who are the regulators of these sort of industries are going to want their pound of flesh, and obviously for tax purposes, etc., and KYC, so to perhaps eliminate or prevent to some degree money laundering, etc. So I don't think this is the end of BitMEX, but they're going to have to change their ways, certainly. Prediction market doubts Trump will complete first term after COVID-19 diagnosis. A pump in daily volume creates an 8% swing on whether Trump will complete his first term. I thought this was interesting, especially now that Trump has become positive for COVID. One of the more macabre predictions gaining attention is on the centralized predicted market run by the Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. Posing the question, will Donald Trump complete his first term, the prediction was originally intended as a measure of the likelihood of the president getting impeached and leaving office, and of course that is no longer an issue. because nobody has an appetite for that anymore. Nobody seems to have an appetite for justice just generally across the board, it seems like. Seems like every day we're hearing about some nefarious CEO or other criminal getting away with all sorts of things, slap on the wrist. JP Morgan was just the recent one with $1 billion fine, which is nothing for the criminal allegations that they were manipulating precious metals and other markets. What should have happened is Jamie Dimon should be in jail, really is what should be happening, and amongst other executives, in my opinion. Only small-time criminals, I should say, are put into jail. White-collar criminals seem to get away with everything except perhaps murder, but that remains to be seen as well. However, interest has grown following news of the president's close aide, Hope Hicks, testing positive for the virus and the president subsequently being tested. Daily volume jumped from a 7-day average of around $6,000 to over $37,000. A good proportion of this must have been placed on no, as the yes price went down 4 cents to 82 cents. Following this morning news that the president's test results came back positive, the yes price has come down another 4 cents to 78 cents. Less than a week ago, the yes price was at a lofty 90 cents. For clarity, the specific rules of this prediction market state temporary incapacity resulting in the temporary transfer of authority to an acting president shall have no bearing on the outcome of this market. With the threat of impeachment no longer hanging over him, this means that predictors are essentially betting on the likelihood of Trump's death. And I don't think that'll happen. Even men of his age and with his probably technical obesity, and I think he has perhaps statins, so he probably has some heart issues. Even at his age and with all those kind of concerns, I think there's a greater chance that he'll survive than he won't. So that is good news. And I think this morning he was tweeting again, so we'll take a look here and see if there's any update on that. Okay, so it doesn't seem to be much here. So we have a live update coming, but at least I thought he was tweeting. Those of you can in the comments can let me know, and hopefully he is tweeting, and so we'll find out how he's doing. As I said, I would imagine that he will survive this. At least the odds are in his favor, certainly. And of course, we wish him well. And if he does survive, of course, that'll be a benefit to the markets. And I think on Monday we'll get a sense of how the markets are reading his health currently. Okay, so let's take a look at the cryptocurrency markets. All right, so we're up 0.6%, $342 billion market cap, 5,893 coins for your purchase and pleasure, and Bitcoin dominance at 57.3%. So just sort of a light green day, as you can see here in the top coins. XRP up 3.1%, which is the highest in the top 14 actually. So I'm not sure what's happening there. Tron down minus 5.5% is interesting. Stellar just barely up, just barely surviving the 7 cents test, I guess. Cosmos doing well. Leo token down, I'm not sure which one that is. We'll head down to Uniswap here, down minus 4.5% and now at $3.70, continuing to decline. Perhaps people are still selling their Uni that they have, that there's dropped to them if you had been using Uniswap. Wow, a substantial decline in Yearn Finance. Now at 16,800. Interesting. All right, there's most of the top coins. As you know, I'm just primarily interested in Bitcoin at the moment. I'm not sure what the long-term outcome with the rest of these coins will be. I think anything that these coins are trying to achieve, Bitcoin can do in time. Time will tell, of course. All right, on to the online oracle for today's most pressing question. So remember, we were talking about BitMEX. Let's see if we can find that again. So here, BitMEX senior team are indicted on October the 1st. And as you know, I think that this will not impact BitMEX survival as a company long-term. And so I thought that would make a good question for the online oracle, the 8-ball economist. So my question for our trusty sidekick is, will BitMEX survive the indictment of its leadership? And I believe it will. Without a doubt. Okay, so that's a fairly positive outlook. And so 8-ball economist seems to agree with me. And hopefully that will be the case. As I said, I don't think this is a huge concern for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency generally. But there you go. There you have it. Thanks so much for joining me, folks. Enjoy your Sunday. Not much happening in the markets next week. So that's why we haven't looked at the earnings reports. Very light on the agenda, actually, on the docket. The only one of note really is, I think, Levi's on Wednesday or so. But other than that, a light week. So probably not much movement in the market. Of course, good news with Trump's health will move the market to the upside. If his health starts to deteriorate, I think that'll move it to the downside, of course. But other than that, I don't see any big moves coming unless we have some sort of black swan or events that happen sort of out of random, if you will. So thanks so much for joining me. Stay well, stay healthy, pay down some debt, squirrel away some savings. There will be good opportunities in the future of the next few years, I'm sure. And in the meantime, remember, dum spiro, sparrow.